All right, looks like everybody's logged in. So we're going to go ahead and start. Welcome to the 2021 Visionary Student Panel. I'm Hannah Van the Bee. I'm the Associate Director of the Research That Reaches Out office at Mercer. We're so excited that you're here today. This is our 6th annual Visionary Student Panel, and we have 7 different projects presented by 12 students, traditional undergraduates here at Mercer. And they've been working really hard over the past several weeks to develop thoughtful, well-planned project pitches. So today they will be talking about their ideas to address real-world problems. So after today, they will be collecting feedback. We have a panel of non-judgy judges here today. So we have Ben Dunn, who's the director of the Teacher and Art Center here in Macon, and an art instructor from Mercer's Art Department. Kristen Bailey, who is a Humanities Research Services librarian for the University Library. Cameron Kunzelman, who is the coordinator of scholarships and fellowships. Lauren Shinholster, who's the coordinator of community engagement, and Mary Alice Morgan, who's a professor of English. They will be judging today and offering constructive feedback to our students that the students will then use to help shape their mini grant application that they'll be submitting next month. So just a couple of housekeeping things. We will be doing the presentation straight through. After students will be presenting for 5 minutes each, after which the judges will be able to do some Q&A, and we will open it up to audience Q&A as well. The chat feature for Zoom today has been disabled, but you can submit questions to the Q&A button, which is it looks the same as chat except it says Q&A. We have some student workers who will be monitoring that, making sure that we don't lose any questions as they're asked. One feature you can take advantage of, there's an upvote option. If somebody submits a question that you would also like to know the answer to, you can upvote it. So we'll know definitely to get to that. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our first group of students. We have Alex, Shells and Amelia Patrick, who I will go ahead and get started.
Hello, welcome, and thank you for attending tonight's presentation. My name is Alexandria Shells, and my partner Amelia Patrick will be speaking a little later in our presentation. Our presentation is entitled How to Be Debt-Free, a Financial Aid Literacy Guide. Next slide, please. One of the biggest problems facing the US today is low graduation rates from higher education institutions of low-income students. Students in impoverished communities graduate at lower rates than their high-income counterparts. That is to say, 77% of Georgia students on free or reduced lunch do not graduate college within 5 years of completing their high school education, as well as 44% of families nationwide do not understand the FAFSA or its importance in receiving financial aid. And this often leads to low-income students overworking themselves to the point of dropping out in an effort to pay for their schooling. Next slide, please. So why is this important and why should we care? Well, I care because I've seen many of my brilliant and intelligent friends have to leave their dream schools because they couldn't afford to stay. We are all well aware of the rising student loan debt in America, but we must also take into consideration what this means for our future workforce and how this contributes to poverty in our very own communities. For bright students in poverty, it doesn't always matter how well suited they are for college. Because of the financial burden, they often end up right where they started. Next slide, please.
Thankfully, though, help exists out there. There are many free programs that teach financial aid literacy. However, many of them only teach financial aid literacy as a small portion of a complete college preparatory program. For instance, a very successful program is the Alabama Blueprints College Success Program. Some of their statistics are that 100% of their students were accepted into college, 85% of them completed the FAFSA, and $6.2 million were awarded in scholarships. Another program, Gear Up, Gaining Early Awareness and Readiness for Undergraduate Programs, is a national discretionary grant program by the U.S. Department of Education. And this is actually implemented in Bibb County schools. The program helps underrepresented students be able to learn the academic skills to stay in college. And one of their main focuses is building confidence. And that is something we really want to work on in our program. Upward Bound is another holistic program that actually targets low income and first generation college students. Mercer takes part in Upward Bound, as you can see by the picture of those high school students that came to Mercer on the tour day. Finally, there is another option of personal hire financial aid consultants. And these are individuals which high school students can pay to help them with the financial aspects of their college career. However, these can be very expensive, and the information they teach is very free and out there and accessible for everyone. So that's something we want students to be able to learn on their own. Next slide, please. So, our plan is that we would like to teach the students this financial aid literacy for free. We have an 8-week program, and the outline of our different weeks, as you can see on the right side of our slide. We are in the process of writing these modules based on information from the Federal Student Aid Office of the Financial Aid U.S. Department of Education website, the Georgia Futures website, the lesson plans of the successful Alabama blueprints mentioned earlier, and we are working to create these modules. We want to lecture the students for 30 to 45 minutes and then have an activity for 15 to 20 minutes to ensure that the students understand. For instance, on the Budgeting for College Week activity, the students will each be given a pretend scenario of college life and they'll have to budget for it to make sure they understand. We have been able to partner with Dr. Washington, the CEO of the Hutchings College and Career Academy, which is a great resource for Bibb County students. She is allowing us to use their facilities in the fall for our program, which will be held for 8 weeks with 1 hour a week program. We are very thankful for our partnership with Dr. Washington, as she is also helping us recruit 10th through 12th grade students for this program. We are very excited and cannot wait to work with the students and teach them more about financial aid. We hope that this opportunity will help students understand how to afford college and to finish their college careers and have a successful future. We can't wait to answer any of your questions later on. Thank you.
All right, next up, we have Ashley Stevens, Mira Patel, and Arthi Shankar.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mira Patel, and I'm joined tonight by my partners, Arthi Shankar and Ashley Stevens. After several semesters of research, including a local needs assessment, we have developed an action plan to fight food insecurity in the Pleasant Hill neighborhood. Now we will dive into our project. Next slide, please. So, the realities of food insecurity. Bibb County has a food insecurity rate of 21.8%. This means that 33,500 people, including 9,750 children, are food insecure. This number surpasses both the national average of 11.1% and the state average of 14.1%. 38.6% of Macon residents earn an income below the federal poverty line. And as fresh and healthy foods are more expensive than processed foods, this is a very important statistic to remember. Furthermore, certain areas in Macon are considered food deserts, creating greater disparity of access to healthy and nutritious food in the Macon community. Food insecurity is characterized by several determinants, including racism and poverty. More so, food insecurity can lead to poor health outcomes, such as being 2 times more at risk for diabetes. Next slide, please. Our why.
As scholars, we each possess a passion for serving others, and we recognize that food insecurity is a pervasive issue in the community around us. Furthermore, food insecurity does not exist in a vacuum. Where people are food insecure, equity and social justice are lacking, and these elements are essential for a healthy community. This slide compares food prices in 2 Macon zip codes. 31204, the area containing Pionono Avenue and Vineville Avenue, has only a local food store and a discount supermarket. Alternatively, 31210 is a more affluent area located in North Macon with 6 supermarkets. Grocery prices in the 31204 zip code are on average higher than the North Macon zip code. The median income of the North Macon zip code more than doubles that of the 31204 median income, so it is troubling to see an area with 40% of its residents being SNAP eligible, having to pay more with less. As Mercerians, we cannot see ourselves as separate from the Macon community. And after seeing these statistics, we felt a need for additional action surrounding food insecurity in Macon. Next slide, please. In terms of community action, there have been many efforts to address food insecurity in Macon. For example, the Mercer School of Medicine's West Initiative brought awareness to healthy food options for the students and families of Alex II Elementary School. The Middle Georgia Community Food Bank, serving 24 counties in Central Georgia, distributes over 9 million meals per year to food insecure individuals. Health Empowers teaches active and healthy learning experiences and helps families incorporate healthy living habits into their diets. In addition, local churches have long sponsored food pantries in Macon. Finally, the Veggie Van and the Mulberry Market meet weekly in Tatnall Square Park and offer local produce for sale while also doubling SNAP benefits to maximize affordability. However, despite the success of these community interventions, food insecurity remains a pervasive issue. Our action plan incorporates a more collaborative approach to the issue, and we are excited to detail this plan to you now. Next slide, please.
Our plan is to create a pop-up produce market that will run once a month in the Pleasant Hill neighborhood with the goal to bring healthy, fresh foods to the area. We are also partnering with community partners, including the Pleasant Hill Neighborhood Association, Health Empowers, United Way, and the Bibb County School District for school nutrition. In terms of obtaining produce, we plan on purchasing ugly produce through Kroger's Zero Hunger, Zero Waste nationwide initiative and selling them. All money earned from selling the produce will go right back into purchasing more produce. We also plan on including vendors from local farmers. In addition, we will have access to an EBT machine, so customers will be able to use their SNAP EBT dollars to purchase any of the produce. We also plan to provide families with recipe cards featuring the different fruits and vegetables we are selling in the market. This project is a long-term project. Our work will not end here, but will continue to grow over the years. We are also aware of the challenges this project will face, and though we may not be able to end food insecurity completely, we hope to positively impact the Macon community to address food insecurity. Before we end, we would like to say thank you so much for your time and for this opportunity to present our project. We look forward to hearing your constructive feedback and your questions. Thank you.
All right,
Hi,
thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Next up, we have Ivy Clarke and Ashley Pemberton.
My apologies. My name is Ivy Clarke. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a rising senior at Mercer, and I'm studying English literature and creative writing.
My name is Ashley Pemberton. I am a second-year student double majoring in journalism and media studies. My pronouns are she, her. And together, Ivy and I are developing the Macon Young Writers Workshop. Next slide, please. First, addressing what the real-world problem is. There are significant disparities in Macon within Georgia literary representation. For example, Chelsea Rathburn, the poet laureate of Georgia and a poetry professor at Mercer, reports not to have received one poem from a Macon high school student out of the competition she has served as judge for. Macon Bibb public schools have a majority minority population of 82%, most being Black. However, Lee and Low Books reported in 2019 that 76% of published books that year were written by white authors. There are significant disparities between Macon within Georgia literary representation, as I said, and with Black voices within mainstream literary representation. The intersectionality of these things creates a huge void in the literary field. Next slide, please.
So why is this issue important to each of us? Personally, as a lesbian who did not see any lesbian representation until I was 20, and I'm 20 now, I know how harmful it can be to feel like you don't exist or don't belong or don't have a future. And because I understand this harm intimately, I want to use my privileges and my platform to support and encourage other communities who are also represented. Furthermore, as a poet, I believe in writing as a tool for expression and empowerment, and I believe my role is to facilitate my knowledge and resources and pass this on to others.
And for me specifically, I'm Caribbean American and I grew up in Macon. And growing up in the public schools, I didn't see any representation in literature that specifically represented my culture. And it wasn't until I got to college that I read books by other Caribbean American women. So I know how important it is to have yourself be represented in media you are consuming. And so I want, and me and Ivy both want, the students in Bibb County to have media and make media that represents their voices. Next slide, please. Why you should care about this issue? Well, the media influences society and society influences media. Poor representation negatively impacts intercommunity relations and vice versa. In addition, literature informs us of who we are and who we can become. When people see themselves represented, they are encouraged to pursue positive futures and positions of leadership. Students who read relevant literature are more motivated to stay in school. Making these resources accessible to underrepresented voices will not just help said voices, but as a result, everyone else, because these stories and narratives that were not previously out in the world will now be out in the world to be heard by everyone. Next slide, please.
So there are a few things already being done to address some of these problems. The Theater Macon currently has a Youth Artist Academy that meets for 1 week during the summer. It is a program that costs money, and it does teach students about everything to do with theater, screenwriting, playwriting, putting on a show. However, we're choosing not to partner with Youth Artist Academy specifically because we want to focus on poetry. We want to host this within a high school so it's accessible transportation-wise. We want to make sure our program is cost-free to the students. There are also a variety of writing tutoring programs in Macon, many of which are sourced at Mercer. However, our program is not a tutoring program. It's a complementary and supplementary writing program to help students grow their own voices. And finally, there is a program called Deep Center in Savannah that began in 2003, much like ours, as a small poetry workshop, and has since expanded to host over 300 students, a variety of writing genres, and also expanded to include art. They're unfortunately too far away for us to partner with, but we do really look up to them, and we hope to contact them for resources and guidance. Next slide, please. So what do we plan to do? We're developing a poetry workshop called the Macon Young Writers Workshop to begin in the fall of 2021. It will begin at one local Macon high school and hopefully expand into others from there. We plan to implement a collaborative curriculum to respond directly to the needs of our students. And we will teach the students the craft of both written and spoken poetry and connect them to opportunities to read and publish their work. We will offer the workshop as an outlet for the stresses this underserved population faces, as well as a place for both skill and personal growth. We are focusing on poetry not only because it is what we have been trained to instruct, but also because poetry is one of the most free domains of literature. To ensure the sustainability of our workshop, it will be facilitated by ourselves, Georgia Poet Laureate Chelsea Rathburn, and other Mercer student volunteers. We want to thank you for your time and your consideration.
All right, thank you. Next up, we have Jasmine Lake.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Lake, and I will be presenting my project, More Than Just the Birds and the Bees, a sexual health education program. Next slide, please. All secondary schools in Georgia are allowed to choose the type of sexual health education program that they want to implement in their schools. This is a problem for two reasons. First, many schools in Georgia still use an abstinence-only sexual education program that has proven to be ineffective at deterring teens from partaking in sexual intercourse. As you can see from the figure on the left, at the age of 18, 65% of teens have had sexual intercourse, and this percentage continues to rise as they enter their college years. Second, because the sexual health education curriculum throughout Georgia is inconsistent, students are entering college with different amounts of knowledge on accessing contraceptives, the transmission of STIs and STDs, and the importance of STD and STI testing. This is apparent in the figure on the right-hand side that demonstrates the continuous increase in rates of chlamydia, gonorrhea, and syphilis, which are three of the most prevalent sexually transmitted diseases. Not only does the overall number of STD cases continue to increase each year, people between the ages of 15 and 24, the college-aged years, acquire half of all new STD cases each year. This reveals that there is a problem that needs to be addressed. Next slide, please. I am personally motivated to combat this problem due to the noticeable differences that I have observed between resources and opportunities given to students at other schools compared to Mercer. For example, Emory University, another private institution, holds a Sexpert mini course each year that focuses on different sexual topics regarding sexual health, such as preventing unwanted pregnancy, recognizing and preventing STIs, and how to improve sexual relationships and communicating boundaries with your partner. In addition, the Emory University community has taken greater steps at communicating their sexual health goals that they plan to meet while also providing students with the resources necessary to meet such goals. For example, the figure on the right is found on the Emory University website and gives detailed information on locations near campus that offer free or low-costing STI testing. Additionally, the university provides free contraceptives in their libraries, student health centers, and all their residence halls. Many of these opportunities and resources are not provided or openly discussed at Mercer University, which makes it more difficult to create an environment that promotes open and honest conversation about sexual wellness. Next slide, please. My project moves to combat the effects of the ineffective and incomprehensive sexual education programs that have been employed in Georgia high schools. On the right, there is a list of critical sexual education topics identified by the CDC that should be used in sexual education programs. Some topics include how to access valid and reliable information, products, and services related to HIV, STDs, and pregnancy, the efficacy and importance of condom usage, and how to support others in order to avoid or reduce sexual risk behaviors. However, only 32% of Georgia secondary schools teach all 16 of these topics that are recommended by the CDC. Therefore, it is necessary to compensate for what sexual health education in high schools lacked. Next slide, please. In addition, this program will help deal with a common problem in the world of medicine, such as the rise in antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Gonorrhea is one of the curable infections, and many people do not consider this to be as dangerous since they know there is a cure for it. However, the bacteria responsible for causing gonorrhea is becoming antibiotic resistant and only has one effective class of antibiotics left to treat it. Implementing better ways for students to prevent the transmission of STDs and STIs will help lower the number of new cases of infections and prevent the evolution of new and more dangerous sexual infections. Next slide, please. Currently on Mercer's campus, there are different organizations that focus on sexual health topics, such as organizations such as URGE and Common Ground. For example, 2 years ago, URGE conducted a free STD and HIV testing event. However, these organizations have a greater focus on reproductive rights, gender equality, and important laws that we should be knowledgeable of. My program would be building off of past sexual health weeks from 2017 and 2018 that work to address different sexual health topics that students wanted more information on, such as detecting sexually transmitted infections, how to discuss your sexual relationship with your partner, and different contraceptive methods. Past sexual health weeks found that about 85% of students did not find that their high school was effective in teaching safe sexual practices. Since then, new students have come to campus and are still in need of opportunities to build their sexual health knowledge. Next slide, please. My goal for my project is to create a comprehensive curriculum that includes open discussion about sexual and reproductive health for all students, regardless of sex, gender, or sexuality. The event will take place for 5 days, where each day focuses on a different topic or event related to sexual wellness. This program will be a chance to provide Mercer University students with better access to contraceptives by providing free contraceptives in the residence halls and at all events, and to provide them better knowledge on how to access STD and STI testing and any desired medical advice. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up, we have Liz Wassaffs.
Oh, hey, my name is Liz Wassaff, and I am describing today the dangers of implicit bias. Next slide, please. What exactly is implicit bias? The unconscious or involuntary acts, attitudes, and demeanors towards people associated with certain stereotypes. Implicit bias can be tested and measured. We can neutralize our implicit biases, and we all have implicit biases. Next slide, please. Where does implicit bias come from? Implicit bias is the result of misconceptions and single-sided narratives being festered. Basically, misconceptions and single-sided narratives create implicit biases because we only have one perspective and we just see those associations. For instance, the media often talks about Mexicans and being illegal immigrants when it's not only Mexicans, there's more to it. And the media often is the source of the misconceptions because they fail to capture the blight of minorities and overlook the systemic oppression. And they just emphasize the association creating the implicit biases. Next slide, please. Why is implicit bias important? The constant reinforcement of incomplete, misguided biases create an unhealthy relationship between students, including you and your friends, lowering the confidence of minorities, creating a social cultural environment that stimulates microaggression. Microaggression is basically disrespect and divides and discomforts and degrades individuals So they no longer felt comfortable in the place that they're in, and they just reinforce social disparities because it becomes a cycle. Next slide, please. How is implicit bias impacting us? Implicit bias impacts all of us because there's different types of hate. There's xenophobia, racism, homophobia, sexism, classism, ableism, antisemitism, and Islamophobia. There's a lot of more. Next slide, please. This matters to me because I experienced implicit bias several times before, and one of them that I experienced on campus was, oh, I wouldn't have expected you to be a science major. And it's kind of like, why wouldn't you have expected me to be a science major? Mercer is like a school full of science majors. Why is this so shocking to you? So I kind of felt a type of way, and I just felt offended kind of. And it's just that's an example of microaggression that creates a hostile environment. Next slide, please. When does implicit bias happen? It happens every day. I noticed a girl walking around asking everybody for a picture. As she approaches me, she makes eye contact with me and walks over to the next table. Then I looked around and noticed that I was the only Black student. I felt really bad. What did she think of me? A Mercer student said, which I was just like, that is pretty much the hostile environment that I noticed as well. Next, after learning that Black transgender people have an average life expectancy of 35 years, whenever I heard the word transgender, I expected to see a white transgender person, a Mercer student, having an implicit bias and recognizing it. Next slide, please. Other institutions took an initiative against implicit bias. And what exactly is being done about implicit bias is University of Texas has a public curriculum on implicit bias. Ohio State University implements its tactics through matriculation. And much like Vanderbilt University, most schools are hosting webinars and training days or even weeks just to train about implicit bias. And Mercer University should be one of them as well. Next slide. So let's neutralize our implicit biases. What I'm proposing is an implicit bias training day where we are trying to neutralize our implicit bias with emotionally investing activities like a virtual walk of privilege, a Kahoot, telling the story of you, disintegrated stereotypes, and more. Next slide, please. Thank you. That's it.
All right, thank you. And next up, we have Marlo, Banton, and Paulina, Molina.
Hi, thank you for being here. My name is Paulina. I'm Marlo. And today we're going to be presenting Slowing Down Fast Fashion. You can go on the next slide. So to begin with, we just wanted to explain a little bit more about what fast fashion is. So fast fashion is defined as an approach to the design, creation, and marketing of clothing fashions that emphasizes making fashion trends quickly and cheaply available to consumers. Some repercussions that come from fast fashion are the fabric waste and pollution. Each American produces about 75 pounds of textile waste per year, according to the New York Times. Landfills received 11.3 million tons of textiles in 2018. And this is all because this clothes is made out of cheap materials that is so fast, so people just buy it, wear it 3 or 4 times, and then they throw it away. You can move on to the next slide.
Okay, so why is it important to us? Going off of what Paulina was saying, fast fashion does create a lot of pollution and waste. And so since we are the youngest generation, this is something that we should be conscious of because we are creating an environment that we're going to be living in. And we can educate our peers by telling them which fabrics contain plastics. And as you can see on the graphic, a lot of things you wouldn't think do actually contain plastics. And lastly, we will be creating lifelong skills for people that they can provide for their family for generations. Next slide, please.
So why should you care? You should care because of the effects on the environment, not just because of the way that the shirts are made, but also through the whole shirt's lifespan or fabric lifespan. So making a shirt, tons of resources are used in different textiles. As you can see in the graphic, you put in raw materials, water, fuel, and not only that, but when it goes to a landfill, it actually takes 200 years to decompose. And during the decomposition process, textiles generate greenhouse methane gas, and this leaks toxic chemicals into our soil, in our grass, and our water, and then we can't use it, our animals can't use it, and it just creates this vicious cycle. You can move on to the next slide.
So a couple things are already being done to address this issue. A lot of companies offer recycling services and clothing lines used to repurpose textiles. But as you can see with the comparison, a lot of these clothing lines are a lot more expensive for people, as the fast fashion are a lot cheaper.
Another thing that is being done is that people like to thrift. But one thing with thrifting is that you can't always find your exact size or something that you really love. So by us teaching them how to use a sewing machine or to knit, so that way they can upcycle the thrifting clothes that they buy, they will produce less waste by repurposing those thrifted clothing. You can move on to the next slide. So what do we plan to do? We plan to incorporate Marlo's skills for knitting and Paulina's skills for sewing to provide a wide range of knowledgeable experience on apparel, craft, and textiles. The way that we're thinking of doing this is by providing video tutorials with at-home kits for those that don't feel comfortable going to workshops. So we would target, for example, the Boys and Girls Club, and we would give them video tutorials and also provide them a kit that they could follow along the tutorial. We would also do workshop rooms. We would love to have a workshop room that would be available certain hours that we could be in the workshop room and they could come in and out and they could be like, hey, if you need help with this, you can come and do it at the workshop room. And we would love to have in-person workshops for those who do feel comfortable attending. And as you can see in the right hand, that's just a template that I've used in the past, and that would be something that would be in the at-home kits that they could just follow along and cut the fabric exactly to the size and then follow step by step. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. And our last presentation of the day is from Zaria Brown.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Zaria Brown, and today I'll be telling you all how I plan to use creativity to inspire and encourage the homeless. Next slide, please. So what is the real world problem? So homelessness is something that affects thousands of people nationwide. According to the most recent point in time estimate from January 2017, there are an estimated 553,742 experiencing experiencing homelessness on a given night. And we all know that due to COVID-19, many more people have been experiencing financial insecurity. So I have no doubt that this number has definitely increased today. Also, according to the 2017 Balance of State Continuum of Care Point and Time Homeless Count report, Macon actually has the highest homeless population in Georgia. And the specific issue that I would like to address revolving homelessness is the loss of self-esteem, lack of purpose, as well as the ability and will to care for oneself, which are among the top personal effects of homelessness on an individual. Next slide, please. So why is this issue important to me? So as I stated before, loss of self-esteem and lack of purpose all affect many homeless people. And as a Christian, I believe that everyone has a purpose and is worth just as much as the next person. Also, both of my best friends have experienced homelessness, and I know for a fact that without support from their community and loved ones, they would not be where they are today and have the opportunities that they have to be successful. And lastly, my passions and skill sets can be used to address this issue. I actually do have my own clothing brand, which served as an inspiration for my project, and you'll see how that connects later. So I say, why not use my gifts and skill sets to serve others? Next slide, please. Why you should care about this issue, right? So homelessness actually hurts our society and economy. In 2012, Sean Donovan, the Secretary of the U.S. Housing and Urban Development Department, stated that between shelters and emergency rooms and jails, it costs about $40,000 a year for a homeless person to be on the streets. Also, homeless people have God-given gifts and abilities that can be used to improve our society just like anyone else does, but it is difficult to contribute while facing housing insecurity. Just think, a homeless person could be the next Steve Jobs or Elon Musk. And lastly, it can happen to anyone. As one anonymous homeless person said, everyone is one serious prolonged illness away from homelessness, which basically means, one very high medical bill could be enough to catapult a person into homelessness. So it's not as difficult to experience as many people may believe. Next slide, please. So what is already being done to address this problem? Many people and organizations already do donate to homeless shelters, and resource centers are started as well to be able to supply physical resources for individuals. And then also art workshops are hosted, which help to improve self-esteem and encourage creativity. And while homelessness cannot be resolved overnight, I would love to address the specific issue of the loss of self-esteem and lack of purpose with the project that I plan to implement an art workshop in that process as well. Next slide, please. So what I plan to do, so I plan on donating clothing items that are most needed for the home, such as undergarments and socks, but I also plan to make it an interactive experience where I would donate t-shirts and host an art workshop where the participants will have a few options of encouraging messages to choose from. They will choose the ones that speak to them the most, and then I will teach them how to print it on their shirts, provide it for them as a way to implement creativity, as well as teach them that they have the ability to learn a skill set and apply it. And even though it may be a simple task, the principle remains true for anything that they wish to learn in life. And afterwards, they will leave with a physical reminder that they are not limited to their current situation and hopefully have a higher self-esteem and a more positive outlook on their future. Next slide, please. So just here's a very general timeline of what the process of implementation would look like in the fall if I am awarded a grant. So in August, I'll be communicating with local community partners and scheduling a date for the event. Currently, through my ethics class, I am communicating with the head of the Daybreak Local Homeless Resource Center here in Macon. Her name is Taya, and she's been helping me with my idea, and she'll help with the implementation of that as well. In September, I will be again acquiring this materials for the event if I do not have them already, which includes a heat press, the clothing, and HTV vinyl, and just making sure that I'm well versed with using the products before I present them to the participants. And then in October, I'll be promoting the event through flyers and social media, and I will ask my partner to do the same. In November, the workshop will be implemented, and in December, I will write a report on the project as well as a reflection. Thank you all for your time and coming, and I look forward to any questions you may have.
All right, thank you so much, all of you. That was excellent. We're gonna move now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And we are gonna move now into Q&A. So judges, I'm just gonna let you Wild West it. So feel free to unmute yourselves at will.
I have a question for Ashley, Mira, and Arthi. So y'all were the project working to connect local partners to counter food insecurity, correct? Can you tell me a little bit more about how you chose like Pleasant Hill and why you chose Pleasant Hill? Like what about that specific location called to y'all?
Yes, so from the beginning of this experience, when we came to decide we want to address food insecurity, we knew we would have to be flexible because as college students, we cannot tackle food insecurity alone. And so we reached out to different community partners, and eventually we were connected with Ariane Smith from the Pleasant Hill Neighborhood Association. And they currently have a need for more food insecurity initiatives. There is a Catholic church in the neighborhood that does food distribution, St. Peter Claver Catholic Church. They have a food garden, but from what I've heard from Ariane, it's stalled largely. And so there's still a great need for further food insecurity efforts there.
Can I piggyback on Kristen's question? This is also for Mira and Arthi and Ashley, just while we have you in the hot seat. You mentioned an ugly produce program at Kroger that's like an existing initiative of theirs. Is that something that y'all have talked with somebody about partnering with, or could you tell us a little bit more about that existing initiative and how you could dovetail your efforts with those existing efforts?
Yeah, sure. So the way that the Kroger program works is that nonprofits, such as some of our community partners, can go ahead and purchase that ugly produce and resell if needed or distribute for distribution. And so we currently are in talks with Community Health Works and United Way and Health Empowers to figure out how we were going to buy that ugly produce. One of our biggest questions was what we would sell at the where we would get our produce from. And so we found that as a nice solution.
So currently, I don't believe there are any initiatives in Macon using the Zero Hunger, Zero Waste program, but nationwide, there have been nonprofits and initiatives that have successfully used it. I believe that they donated food to the Middle Georgia Community Food Bank a few years ago, but those were non-perishable goods. We are wanting more to target fresh produce, and they only will donate to 501c3s. So that's where our community partners come in, like United Way. They would provide us a channel to hopefully take advantage of that opportunity.
Thanks, y'all.
Can I hop in? So I have a question for Alex and Amelia. Ooh, I don't know why I can't. The AA sound is hard. Alex and Amelia. There we go. Sorry, I'm looking over here at my other screen where I took notes. So I think the project is really cool, but the question that kind of I run into for it is, how do you avoid a scenario of winners win? Meaning students who are already college bound and interested in doing things from their community, or, going beyond their community, right? I came from a deeply rural area. I'd never heard the word FAFSA before I went to college, and boy, did I have to fill it out very quickly. So I'm curious, right? Like, I just happened to luck out, but many people that I went to high school with certainly didn't. And I was driven to go to college when they didn't really know that they needed the skills to get there. So how do you prevent people from falling through the cracks? How are you going to recruit people into the program? Things like that.
So I think that's where our community partner with Dr. Washington comes in, because that is also something we thought about. We didn't want just like high flying AP students, like IB, they have everything, their ducks in a row. So with Dr. Washington's help, being at the College and Career Center, we're targeting all high schools in the Macon-Bibb County area, and the College and Career Center especially targets students that are looking more at a non-traditional route to getting a degree or getting into the workforce. So with her help, we'll be able to advertise across the county to multiple students. And we also do plan on kind of incentivizing and encouraging people to show up, even if they don't think that they are college material. Or they don't think that they think they are college material, but don't know how to afford it. So that's something that we plan on really kind of pushing in our advertising, as well as working with Dr. Washington.
So I want to now piggyback off of that question. And part of this is I'm asking if you feel like there's room for growth in the program, because as someone who basically was a FAFSA student when I was in college myself, so much of that wasn't something in my control because I had to wait for my parents to complete their tax forms. Do you think there's a place in the future for this initiative to partner with a local free tax prep kind of service so that the students and the parents can be ready to submit these forms?
That's a great question. We had not thought about partnering with the tax program, but we have thought about, we have one of the days scheduled to fill out the FAFSA, and we are wanting to ask the students to invite their parents, and we want to live stream that day for the parents to get the parents involved, because we do think it's really important to get the parents involved throughout this. But that's a great thing to consider and think about for the future. Thank you.
I have a question for Jasmine.
Yes.
Jasmine, love the project that you're proposing. What kind of pushback from the university do you expect, and how are you going to negotiate it?
Well, I know there's going to be pushback most likely about implementing contraceptives in all the residence halls. And so for that, I'm just planning, the most I can do is conduct research with the IRB and figure out how much knowledge or how little knowledge the student body in general has about the transmission of STDs and their feelings on being able to access contraceptives, because I know a lot of students are embarrassed to just go out to stores and buy them themselves. And as I said in my presentation, when they have when the high schools do not educate them on these things, they have a greater risk of sexual risk behaviors. And one of those is to have sexual intercourse without contraceptives because they can't get to them. So I feel like just getting a better kind of overview about how the knowledge of the student body and whether they can access contraceptives would be the best way to convince Mercer administration that this is necessary.
Can I follow up on this? Have you identified any partners that might be able to intercede on your behalf? So for example, do you think the med school or the program in public health, can you try and not be going solo in advocating?
I did talk to, well, I am planning to work with a medical student, but there isn't anyone at the med school like administration that I can partner with specifically, but I have found some community partners that deal with specifically HIV in the Macon area and providing testing for the Macon community. So those are the community members I'm starting to talk to and plan with in the future.
I think it'll be really important to try and advocate with some partnership, since this is such a touchy subject. Shouldn't be, but it just is. That's just the reality. So, I think having some conversations about that would be great.
So I have a question for Ivy and Ashley, which I guess at the end of y'all's presentation, maybe this is just me, I had some lingering questions about kind of the role of like the workshops that you're describing as sort of like, they seem to be more like generative, like we're workshopping the creation of poetry with students to encourage representation through the generation of content. But I wonder, are there any plans or avenues for increasing exposure to existing more successfully representative or diverse literature and literary efforts within the discipline at this time?
There are. So along with our, embedded within our curriculum, we want to also include readings by living poets. I think we both think it's incredibly important. So we're considering people like Jericho Brown, Amanda Gorman, and whoever, talking with our students the first meeting and figuring out what they want to read about, what they're interested in reading about, and then providing them with those books. Again, free of cost, but having sort of like a little library where they can pull the books from and read from these living poets, just so they can, like you said, they have some positive people to look up to already. But that is in the plan, in the works.
I have an additional question for Ivy and Ashley. Part of this, you're asking for, you're wanting diverse representation in the students that will attend. What time are you planning on holding these workshops? Are you going to be able to make this part of the normal school day? Or is this going to have to be a pre or post school day kind of activity?
We are very flexible.
We are looking at,
oh, you go, Ashley.
Okay, so yes, as Ivy said, we are very flexible, but as of right now, we're looking at like post-class activity. We were talking specifically with Central High School, and I know that like as someone who like was with Central High School, because I also went to high school here, they have a lot of post-class activities already, so a lot of students there are already going to be there after like classes end, so it makes it like a pretty like target time for us to be able to have the workshop. But then again, we are very flexible and we're also working out the kinks, but that is the plan as of right now.
Yes, like Ashley said, we're hoping, right now we're hoping for after school. We are open to hosting it during a lunch period, but we don't want to take away from students' lunches. And we also know some high schools have flex periods, so that would also be an opportunity, but just upping what Ashley said, hopefully after school.
Okay.
I'd like to ask a question about the fast fashion. I'm still not exactly clear how you're going to use materials that have already exist and maybe cut them up and repurpose and upcycle so that it doesn't go into landfills. Am I clear on what your plan is?
Yes, so hopefully, that's a great question. Hopefully our plan is to teach them how to like thrift better. So taking, let's say like these two sweaters and maybe this one has a hole, so we want to fix it, we want to patch it up, but we want to make it cute. So using materials that we already have used, also using, I know that like on Facebook Marketplace, there's a ton of people that have old textiles that they're like, we don't use them anymore. You can have them for $10. And so we're planning on getting support from our local community and also teaching them like, hey, this is a better way of thrifting without having to buy at Forever 21 or Shein or H&M.
Okay, so this is going to sound confrontational. That's not my intention. But as somebody who doesn't sew, doesn't have much time, not very artistic, sorry, I'm just really disparaging myself here. Why would I do that instead of just going on back to H&M or wherever, Old Navy, and just getting something new that's fashionable and save myself time and headache?
So I think this is where our targeting the Boys and Girls Club, so teaching them young, so that way, you know, they would have more time to learn and they would catch it on quicker. And hopefully they could translate this to their parents, because my mom is the same, does not sew, does not have time, is not artistic at all. And so it's kind of just me like, hey, like, does my little sister want a new sweater? Like, and so that's kind of our plan.
And also, if you do go buy a sweater at H&M or Forever 21 or something, they don't last you as long as if you were to handcraft it. And so to teach them these skills, it's something that would last them a lot longer than buying from these fast fashion.
So I have a question for you related to some of this. So I think I misunderstood your original audience because I felt like you were trying to speak to specifically to Mercer students. How are you going to, you said you wanted to have a lab space, kind of what I'd call a costume shop and kind of things like that. Where would it be and how would you implement lab safety for elementary, middle, and high school students? Because there are some dangers to those spaces.
And that's where it would come to where it would only be open when either of us are there. So that way it's not a free reign. We're still tweaking about like stuff like where would we have it set up. We were thinking maybe talking to the business school about the MIC or something that would be easily accessible for us. And that way we could be there at a certain time.
So continuing down this kind of line and train of question and thought, how would the users get there? If y'all are hosting it on Mercer's campus, but you're specifically asking for the Boys and Girls Club to come in kind of thing, we're asking for these middle high school students, how would they get to that space?
Well, there are also a variety of the places that we mentioned, for examples of who we would be targeting. We have a lot of different options of, we might, like, I know we mentioned the kits that we could do. So something like the Boys and Girls Club, that might be a better idea for them to send a kit and explain to them, you know, how to make a beanie for the winter or something like that. So I think it would depend on which market we're targeting to which thing we would use for that. So
okay. Yeah,
thank you for your questions.
You're welcome.
If it's okay, I have a question for Liz that I wanted to ask that I'm excited about. So in terms of getting rid of implicit bias on campus, I'm confused with what you're envisioning. Are you comparing other programs at other universities and wanting to implement them here at Mercer? Or are you thinking of starting a new program from scratch? What are your vision, I suppose?
There we go. You got it.
Sorry, but my vision is that I can use those programs and the knowledge and what exactly worked from those programs to make my own program where it's an implicit bias training day that has worked with different activities that worked for them, basically. because a lot of those programs, they do require a lot of time, and I know a lot of students like don't have a lot of time to just give up like that. But not give up, but just to dedicate towards implicit bias. Thank you.
I have an additional question related. So you kind of given us some information about this, but are you wanting to start, because I know that you've got to probably start somewhere and then grow out. Are you wanting to start with a focus on things for students or kind of training for faculty and staff?
I was meaning to start with students, because doing that with faculty, I feel like it's just going to be more difficult with faculty, because faculty is just like older, and I guess I just feel like they wouldn't be open as students will. Maybe that's just me generalizing that, but I just felt like it would be easier for students, but I can later on open up to faculty.
I had a question for Zaria, just related to, I know your just kind of screen printing process. The plan, I think, is to potentially partner with Daybreak. So besides kind of doing kind of a one-time event, what is your, hopes for continuing that? Because I know you're interested in kind of teaching skills and building that capacity.
Yes, great question. Actually, I spoke to Taya this morning, and she basically kind of alluded to what you're saying, kind of having it be a continual event. And she said it would be a great way to kind of have community involvement with the homeless people as well. And yeah, so definitely, this is a first time thing, and I'm excited. I really do hope to implement it well, but definitely do want to have it be a continual thing, and just get more people involved in the community. And like you said, teach them a skill set that they could take with them in the future.
Have you done, for lack of a better word, like a vibe check with the people at Daybreak, not just staff, but unhoused people who use the I guess services there? Because I can kind of see two universes, right? That the way that this goes, right? One is that people find it really empowering. The other is that people find it very dismissive, right? I could see it like not going down super well to be like, here's a t-shirt, you got to pick a good phrase. Now you're going to go back to being unhoused, right? There's a, a kind of disjuncture there for me, maybe. So, I mean, have you talked beyond just with Daybreak staff in that regard? Have you talked to any unhoused people, in Central City Park or anything like that, to see what the feeling is there?
Yes, that's a great question. I actually have not. It's definitely something to consider. I will say, Taya, she did mention to me certain things that could be, I guess, like you said, maybe discouraging with some of the people, such as maybe even the diction and like the phrases that I have, like some of them may not even be able to read. So I do think there's a lot of things to consider that goes to that. And thank you for pointing that out. I'll definitely do some research and talk to some of those individuals and get their perspective on it.
Yeah, thank you.
I also think that Cameron asked a really good question, but I have a kind of question probably on the opposite end of that spectrum, is that, do you see a place where this could, if they have the opportunity to be as creative as they'd like with this, that there could be a place for them to generate some sort of income through creative design?
Yes. One way I feel like could be if, when they are more financially secure, to take that skill, but in where they are now, to help them get to that point. Yes, definitely. Also, Taya, she mentioned this as well, being away with us making shirts, we could actually have a way to sell them, I guess, and make money that could go towards not just the center, but the actual individual who put the work in to make it. So that's definitely another good question to consider.
All right. Do we have time for one more question? Do we have any other questions? All right. Well, that timed out perfectly. And we haven't had any audience question submissions, which I will take as a good sign, y'all. Well, this concludes the Visionary Student Panel Thank you to all of our student presenters. You have been wonderful. And thank you also to our judges for being here and for offering such helpful feedback and giving and asking such thoughtful questions. Okay, so this concludes. So I'm going to stop the recording